Good afternoon, everyone. I am John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside. Brenda Haas joins us today for her session, Memories on a Page. Brenda's debut novel, Finding Sutton's Choice, won the Literary Titan Gold Award, or Book Award, 2 International Impact Book Awards, and the Pencraft Award for Fiction. And today, Brenda is here to explore with you how to write slice-of-life moments for your own personal essays. I would ask you to please mute your cell phone ringers if you haven't already, and help me in welcoming Brenda Haas.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Small crowd, I'll take it. That's just fine. I wanted to just first off say thank you. I know there are a couple in this crowd that have already read my book, Finding Sutton's Choice, which is fiction. But today we're going to talk about a little bit further back in my past, my years of doing essay writing, and I still do it from time to time, but it's really how I got my start. So let's get started on that note. So I am, again, award-winning author of Finding Sutton's Choice, set here in Lakeside, so the book is fiction. But what's interesting about the story is that it's so much of it is about memory. A young woman has to go back to her hometown when her estranged father may have Alzheimer's. So some of the storyline is actually along those lines of his memories, which come out in form of journal entries. It is also a lot of storytelling through the point of the main character, Charlotte, who has to go back in time a little bit and think about her upbringing. So that is part of what I get to with the book itself. And I want to just, really talk today about those small little chunks that can become bigger stories. And that is our personal essays. So as you can see, I was Ohio born, went to Otterbein. The primary place that I ended up doing a lot of my work with essay writing was through my work with the Penn Franklin News Publishing Company. I did what is called, basically a filler column. So it wasn't nearly as exciting and important as some people might think. But what I did with it is I was just really just telling humorous and heartfelt stories about my own life, everyday events. And that's really what it comes down to when you talk about essay writing. So let's think about an essay. There are multiple ways that you could write an essay, different types of essays. As you can, if you've got something that you want to really hone in on in terms of a topic that you feel strongly about, perhaps you would be writing an argumentative essay. If you wanted to just maybe talk more about the evidence-based facts of 2 sides of a story, then you might think of an expository essay. But what we're going to mostly talk about today is the third, the descriptive essay. Descriptive essays are really just storytelling. It's you talking about moments in time using sensory and creative language. And that's what we're going to hone in on today. So, a moment in time, what does that even mean? Well, those of you that have been to some of my other sessions, you may remember this story. I'm not going to read it aloud to you today. But one of the essays that I wrote many moons ago, and it's still one of the funniest essays, mostly because I'm making fun of myself, is the time way back when, sort of in the midst of getting to cell phone times, I didn't have a proper cell phone, but my children finally did. And I went into one of those stores, the $5 and below stores, and I see this black box, this little black box. It was about yay high, maybe about this big around. And the label on it said, Bluetooth speaker. $5. And I about lost my marbles. I thought that was the coolest thing that I could take home to my very techie children. Because they had cell phones. Of course they would love a Bluetooth speaker. So I take this phenomenal little device that was so cheap, and I go home and it sits on the corner of my counter. I can't figure out how to get it to work. I don't know what it means to, it's got a couple of holes in it. There's one on the top, there's one on the side. There's this big latch thing that I'm assuming you open and put batteries in. I didn't really know. It came with a cord that you could plug into one of the holes, but I didn't know how to get it to work. And it sat there for days. Then we took it on vacation, 2-week vacation in the Outer Banks, and it sat on that counter for days. No one could figure out how to get this thing to work. So I drag it back home, we're unpacking, and finally I thrust it at my husband, who is an engineer. If he can't get it to work, no one can. So he looks at the device, turns it this way and that way, and then he looks at me and really gives me that look like he just can't quite believe I don't know what this is. And then from the drawer, he pulls the pencil and he pushes it in and it goes, "Rrrr." And lo and behold, my Bluetooth speaker, not so much. Pencil sharpener, yes. So this is the type of story that can so easily be an essay. Now, what did we learn from that? Well, other than the fact that I'm obviously no longer a technological guru, we also can take away from that a little hint of what it feels like as an adult to see our world move on without us. It's a very subtle story in that respect, because I went for the laughs, and that's okay. But if you look a little bit deeper in that story, you realize that I'm really just talking about feeling a little bit old. So, again, slice of life moments. Hopefully you've been reading this while I was yammering on about pencil sharpeners. The whole goal in writing an essay, you're honing in on that moment in time, but it also allows you to maybe better understand that moment in time. And what I mean by that is you might be just writing a story that you can't get out of your head. You don't know why you keep coming back to it. And until you get it down on paper, you may not fully understand or appreciate what you are learning from that story and what those around you might learn from you telling it. So, classic example as well, on my daughter's graduation day, as she was getting ready to walk down the path to accept her diploma, I had a buzz on my hip telling me that my grandmother had passed away. And I wrote about that story because for me it was such an odd day. It was all about new beginnings for my daughter, but it was also about an ending of someone who was very important to me. Beginnings, endings, generationally, that's a big deal. So let's talk a little bit more about the structure of an essay. So I was given this information a very long time ago by the head of the English department at the University of Pittsburgh. Good friend of mine, she's a memoirist, so she has full-length stories that she has taken, and basically essays can easily make up single chapters of a memoir. It's your moments in time over life. And what she taught me way back when is that you basically have a snake eating its tail. You start with the snake and you set up a point. So essays typically do have a point. Again, you may not know what that point is until you've already written the story. You might have to go back and really think about that. But you've got a point. Typically, you will want to have that point noted at the beginning of the story if you are going to be submitting. So figure out what your point is, even if you have to wait and do it after you've written it, and then somehow wrap that back around so that you have it at the beginning. So your point should be at the beginning. You're going to talk about what happened in that moment. You're going to move through that story, and you're going to make your way back around and restate the point. So again, your hope is that in telling this story, somebody can look back and go, oh, I get it. I get what this story is really about. It may only be, again, just a slice of life moment in time. I'll give you a couple more examples of the types of things that I used to write for my Penn Franklin newspaper. We got a new dog. It was a puppy. We hadn't had a new puppy or a baby anything in our house for many, many years. My children were already teenagers at the time. I had forgotten what it was like to have a baby in the house. And so I did a whole essay on those moments of having to get up in the middle of the night, cleaning up messes, feeding, all those things. And I used my puppy experience to talk about some of those moments that I missed, actually, but also moments that I didn't miss about having grown children. Another thing that I wrote a story about, way back my first day out of high school, I got a phone call from my high school music teacher. And Miss King was very excited because she had an opportunity for me. Back in the day, I had a goal of being the next Bette Midler or, some other Broadway star. And she was friends with a company that did the entertainment for amusement parks all over the United States. And I got a phone call on my day after high school graduation indicating that somebody had backed out of their job and they needed somebody in a hurry. And so I wrote an essay about my experience of moving away from home for the first time ever, living with strangers for 3 months, being on my own, having to budget my food, budget my money so I could pay to eat but also enjoy my time. So those are the types of things. So what I'm going to do real quickly is I am going to read through one of my favorite essays. And this is a favorite mostly because it's so tied to how we think here in Lakeside. So back when I lived in Pittsburgh for many years, and we were contemplating selling our house. It was a 30-year-old home. It had a lot going on. It had a lot it needed done, just like many of the properties here in Lakeside. Beautiful, expensive feature creep. It started outside. Our home is almost 25 years old. When we first moved in, the siding was beautiful, but high maintenance cedar. Every 4 to 5 years, we'd debate having it stained, at least on the sunny sides. The dry wood would soak up the color like a sponge. Staining was expensive but necessary to protect our investment. One year, a woodpecker decided our house might make a nice pecking post. What a snack. Big fuzzy carpenter bees would hover around the wood trim, drilling and disappearing into pencil eraser-sized holes. The woodpecker just loved those bees. So we called a pest control expert. Expensive, but necessary. After more layers of stain than I care to count, too many holes from the various creatures, and a layer of pest repellent, we finally called a siding contractor. Our new high-grade siding investment a lovely shade of sage green, just like the old stain we used to use on our house. Beautiful and low maintenance that siding was. Expensive, but necessary. Of course, we could hardly stop there. Our dingy covered porch needed fresh light fixtures and ceiling fans. The ceiling itself looked old and worn compared to the new siding. We put in stained tongue and groove wood slats. Of course we did. Beautiful, expensive. Necessary? Perhaps not. One day, less than a year later, I was minding my own business, sitting on my new porch, admiring my new siding, when a respectable-looking sedan slowed in front of my driveway. An apple-cheeked, earnest young man bounded up my steps with a handshake and a smile, a ready compliment on his lips about our rejuvenated farmhouse-style abode, and a fantastic deal on new windows from his company. Great way to add value to our home, the apple-cheeked fellow said. Great way to highlight the new siding. No kidding. We weren't even in the market for new windows, but by golly, it was an offer we couldn't refuse. And so we got beautiful, expensive new windows. Granted, I didn't even know we needed them, but they really are lovely. Next came the new coat of paint in our kitchen, our entryway, and the dining room, which led to a new chandelier and new floor grates. After much discussion, we decided it only made sense to continue updating our kitchen. Seriously, how could we not? The fresh paint was laughing down at us, taunting us. Those 90s style bright white laminate countertops just screamed, "Let me retire." No one would take us seriously if we put our house on the market with such a tired, used kitchen. A kitchen renovation was another great way to add value to our home, you know. But before we could think about the countertops, we needed to replace several of the cupboard doors, which had worn gouge marks from constant use. That required a stain color match expert from Amish country. The new doors, oh, they were beautiful, and surprisingly, not that expensive. I took what I saved and I bought all new door hinges and knobs on Amazon with that money. The granite countertops with flecks of brown, gold, and black look simply smashing with them. So does the new sink and the new outlet covers. Next up, a subway tile backsplash and a dishwasher. Perhaps a new kitchen table and chairs. Beautiful, expensive, very expensive. Feature creep. It's just a story. It's just a simple story about updating my house. But I think it also speaks to how one thing can lead to another, particularly when you're trying to do upgrades like that. That's all there was to it. Moving on. So let's begin. How do you do your own essay? How do you, what can help you if you ever were to wish to actually formulate a proper essay? Go beyond just journaling and write a story with beginning, middle, and end with a point. Some things that you can do that would help the process. One is the clear, obvious, be vulnerable. So I write funny stories like this, yes. I also write stories that were really hard to write, stories that are difficult for me to even get on the page. That's the reason I'm not reading them today, because usually I need Kleenex for some of those stories. The point is that if you're vulnerable on the page, people will get it, they will understand you, and they will connect with that vulnerability. If you can't be vulnerable on the page, then it might be a story that you're maybe just not quite ready to actually write, and that's okay too. Jot down some, you can always, if you're not quite there, you can jot down just some bullet points of what you'd like to approach later about a particular moment in time, and you can go from there when you are ready. Don't overlook the small stuff. Like I said before, the kicker is these are just normal stories. Daily stories, stories about just your basic life. You don't have to go into a burning building and save a child for it to be a good story. There's something to learn from just about any story, particularly those that most normal people can connect with. And as I said, you do want to include a point if you can. Oftentimes, I don't understand my point until I've actually, written the story. And in time, as I go back through with editing, I realize really what I have done. And usually then I will come up with a sentence that kind of ties everything together that I can filter into the front of that story to get my point across. And the other thing with regard to starting a story is to not start it too late. I think many of us feel like we have to set everything up. We don't. If you write a story and you go back to read it and you could basically chop off the first paragraph or the first 4 sentences or whatever it may be, probably you could do that without hurting the story, and you can just chop off the beginning and start it at the right place, a little further along. And I will also just mention, this is particularly important if you are held to a word count. Most of the essays that I have done and had published are between 700 and 1,000 words. That's not a lot of words. So if you are one of those people that has to kind of set everything up, you may want to go back and really think about the editing process through that. But again, it's okay to kind of dump people into the moment. So I hope most of you picked up the writing prompt sheets that I had placed out front. If not, I have more up here and I can get one for you. What I want to just show you is that writing of the 1-sentence beginning. So this is an example of something that would be classified as a great beginning, an entry point, so that people immediately are drawn in. We'll get to the point in a moment. So the night my mother pulled me out of bed and rushed me next door to my grandparents' farmhouse, we watched from behind closed curtains for the rusted red Camaro, my father's Camaro, to crawl past. It gets your attention immediately. There's not a lot of setup. What is the point to this story? I was 14, hadn't seen my father in nearly a decade, and part of me ached to understand why he'd been absent nearly all my life. Yes, this is true. You look at this story setup, and it could be fiction just as easily as it could be me just telling you a story about my life. Now, that doesn't mean I have a particularly interesting life, but there are things about this that you want to take note of. Action verbs, a little hint of mystery. And as I said, I did include a point. I basically set things up in such a way that you can kind of say, okay, I sort of know where this story might go. So for those of you that do does anybody not have the writing prompt? Okay, get you one. So what I would like for you to do is take a moment. I'm going to actually I'm forcing you to write. Anybody else?
Yes, thank you.
Hold on, I'll grab one. So choose one of the writing prompts that was given to you, or you can also, if you have something of your own that you would like to think about, if there's not anything on here that gets you interested. And there's pens and here. There you go. So writing workshops, you're lucky. The last time I did this writing workshop, it was a full 2 hours, and there were like 5 writing prompts. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. I am going to time it, and it's very uncomfortable when there's silence. And you're going to get over that because you're going to be forced to write something while you're just sitting there. Just give it your best shot. And I think you're going to find that it's harder than you think to come up with that point. But hopefully you have some story that you might like to actually write in the future. You have 1 minute. No pressure. It's good if you can do it in 1 sentence. I don't expect perfection on this by any means. And really, it's mostly because I don't want you to have to feel like you have to keep going with it.
I guess once you open that sentence, like,
Yeah, it just flows. Well, if you're flowing, go for it. You still have about 30 seconds. Nope, not even 30. Time flies when you're having fun. Okay. So my first question would be, is there anyone that would like to actually share? Yeah. Go ahead.
okay. It was July of 1963. My family, in quotation, mother, father, brother, and I were leaving our small town in Sicily to board a ship in Palermo that would take us across the Atlantic to my uncle and aunt's home in Cleveland. I was 8 at the time.
Nice. Wow. And you said family, so are you adopted?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No, but
Okay.
I wanted to say it wasn't just me.
Oh,
it was
gotcha.
My mother and father
Okay.
and brother. So should I put their names or?
No, that's okay. I think I would just do family. What's cool is it's automatically, this is just going down a total path of historical fiction, and I want to read your story, You know, I think too, so then the question would be, what is the point? Is there a point to the story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There's many.
Okay, so that's the kicker. So sometimes we are talking about a moment in time and we never really get there. So I want you to really think about that. Anybody else? Yeah,
As a little girl, I was always terrified of dogs.
okay. And I'm guessing that your actual moment in time is a moment when you were terrified, when a dog,
No, actually, it's going to be, it'll go on to talk about how as an adult, I got a dog, my husband and I got a dog.
okay.
And it warmed its way into our hearts.
So part of your story point may be, I would never have thought in a million years that I'd be sitting here with a puppy in my lap or something like that. Yes. So there you go. So that's the flip. That is the flip. That's the point. Anyone else? Anyone else care to share? Yeah.
When I was 12 years old, my family became campers.
Okay. So the camping part of it, that's a family dynamic. What is the point?
Well, the point is to talk about my dad and how the mean dad
Okay.
We have a different dad.
So your point might be something along the lines of camping brought out the best in my father, who didn't always have the best brought out in him, or something along those lines. All right. Okay. So what I want you to think about is what I like to do. Some people may prefer to journal, where it's just kind of stream of conscious. That's fine. Write things down. If you are a journaler, you're literally 2 steps away from essay writing. If there are stories, I always, I have so many stories that I would love to tell, that I would love to go back and just think about things in my world and my life that I didn't fully understand at the time. Maybe I was too young to understand them. But I think we all have those things that we just can't quite get out of our heads. And it's those stories that usually make the best essay stories, because there's a reason that we can't get them out of our heads. And so the best thing you can do is, even if it's just a bulleted list, jot down what you can remember of that time. I would also just say that one thing that I think about is always the history that we're handing down to our family members. For those people that are remotely into genealogy, write everything down as much as you can, as soon as you can, because we all think we're going to remember it, and we won't. Our history, our past is only as accurate as our perceptions of those moments in time. Unless we've written something down, it's all about our memory. And the thing that I always come back to, and what I hone in on a lot in my book, is that principle of, our past is only as accurate as our memories. And if our memories, it's just a perception. So if our memories are not documented in some way, our ideas of what happened back then may not be accurate. Sure.
What would you say is the difference between an essay and a memoir?
Okay, so I get that question a lot. So her question was, what's the difference between an essay and a memoir? Well, I like to look at it, the most basic way I can explain it. Essays are what make up a memoir. So if you think about memoir writing, typically you're thinking of, let's just say 20 chapters of someone's life, and there is still going to be a point. They wrap up those little stories, those mini stories that make up the chapters in a memoir. Those are essays. So I look at essays. The word essay, like I said, can be argumentative. There are other types of essays. But when you think about descriptive and you think about a narrative essay, those are often just baby, and journaling is a baby essay. It's like an unformed essay. Yes?
Do you know about Storyworth, which is 2 years ago for my birthday? My family gave me a year's subscription to Storyworth, about which I knew nothing. Once a week, someone in my family chose a question for me to answer. Write it, and at the end of the year, 55 years test, well, whatever.
You would have, yes.
290 pages.
That's a lot of writing, and I give you props.
A scary but fun exercise.
So those are basically, that is a form of journaling is what you're doing. Not necessarily essay, because not all those stories may have a point. But what's cool about it is you could look at all those. So she basically was she was given a program through her family that basically forced her to answer a question regularly.
I'm doing the same
Yes.
right now this year.
Yeah, and what's beautiful about it is it does make you it forces you to write daily or at least weekly. You might get behind, but because you're doing it for your family, and what's beautiful about it is your family has those stories that can now be something that is part of your family history. But with memoir versus essay, you really do have a question mark there. Memoir, there's usually, okay, I'll give you my example. Lori Jakila. It's spelled Jakaiela, like tequila, but with a J. Sounds like, anyway. So Lori Jakila wrote, she's had quite the life, and she's wrote several memoirs about different aspects of her life. So each memoir has a point. So one memoir happens to be about her time as a stewardess for a major airline. I won't go into which one, Delta. That she was, but everything she learned from that experience of being a world traveler. There's one memoir. That's what she started with. She's had multiples. She has one about learning that she was adopted and finding her birth parents. She has one about going through cancer with her mother. So each of her, her life, just what a wonderful lady, and she's been through so much. But if you think about it from a memoir versus just an essay, you could write little stories, little essays about all that. But a memoir typically has a defining point or a common theme that is held throughout the whole story. So that's the basic difference there. So getting back to what you can do to help your situation with the storytelling, I always recommend allow people, unless you're doing an argumentative essay, allow people to form their own opinions. If you're beating them over the head with, this isn't true, by the way, I hate puppies. Actually have one. But if you come right out at the very beginning and say, I hate puppies, what's the point of reading this story? No one's going to get anything out of that, particularly if they don't hate puppies. They're going to be like, well, this is pointless. I don't want to listen to this. But if you go into it with the understanding that you're really just explaining to people how you felt in that moment, they can gain and determine their own opinion on that. They may or may not agree with you. By the end of it, they may hate puppies. I doubt it. Who hates puppies? Really. Also, include dialogue. I did not do that really too much with the story that I read to you. That's a pretty early essay. And I do recommend that dialogue can be often very beneficial if it stands out. It's okay if it's not exactly accurate. And for those of you that do like memoirs, for instance, A Million Little Pieces by James Frey did get in a lot of hot water for just basically making stuff up. So you don't want to do that. But again, your essay is really just your perceptions of that moment in time, what you got out of it. So it's okay if you try to actually, incorporate a little dialogue from time to time. Funny sells. I like writing somewhat bittersweet, often slightly funny stories. And quite frankly, my life has been sort of an awkward mess at times. So I have all sorts of great material. But you also want to always make sure that the point is still within the story and that you don't take the joke too far. Expensive feature creep. I probably took it too far in that one, but I still like that story. And obviously revise. Again, I go back to word count. If your story goes like this, then people are going to read it like this, and they may not get the point. Get rid of things that aren't necessary in that story. Make it short, tight when it needs to be. I like to actually mix up my structure of my sentences. So feature creep was a classic example. I would wrap it back around and use that little phrase occasionally in that story to just get you back to the point of the story. But revising is huge. Editors, readers and editors, they don't want it to be necessarily flowery language so that we know that you're a wonderful writer. They want it to be a simple story, but told in a different, more thought-provoking way. Action verbs. I said this before, but it's so important to get rid of the lazy passive verbs that we all feel like we need to do. I was this, I had that. No. My mother pulled me out of bed, rushed me next door to my grandparents' farmhouse. The rusted red Camaro crept past. I love good verbs. So, I always recommend if you are writing, even just for yourself, have some fun with it. There are some wonderful verbs that can replace, usually a verb can replace 2 to 3 words of all that setup with I was going to or whatever. And the other thing that I really, really appreciate is using your senses. I didn't read it to you today, but I love reading stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that use sensory. And the reason I love that is because it really sets me in the place. Wherever this person is experiencing this moment, I like to be right there. So if you're going to tell me a story about going on your first roller coaster ride to Cedar Point, I want to smell the cotton candy or the sweaty guy behind you. I want there to be that. The use of senses, definitely what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're smelling, any of those can add a lot to your story. So then the other question becomes, are you interested in publishing? So just for a raise of hands so I don't waste anyone's time, anybody actually thinking that they might want to submit at some point? Okay, all right. Well, we're going to do it. We'll do it quickly. So the biggie is online and print publications do accept first-person essays. Some of them, only take published writers that have already been out there, but many of them take unpublished writers. You could get paid, you could get not paid. I started out with just being happy that my name was on it, but pretty quickly went to a point where I was at least getting, a couple $100 for essays in some of the bigger newspapers. Some of my earliest essays were written for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. I also did one for a magazine down in the Outer Banks. There are a gazillion places that accept essay submissions, and many of them are now online, of course. The biggie is follow the directions. Don't go off script. Whatever they say to do, that's how you need to actually submit it. And it's always a good idea, too, if you're going to be doing this with multiple stories, keep a journal so you know, some sort of submission journal, or at least a nice little notebook full of information so you know who you sent to and don't accidentally send to them again. And the biggie, of course, is not taking rejection personally. A lot of people don't realize that submissions go on year-round. Sometimes they're themed. Sometimes, there may be a magazine that loves your story, but they've already gotten 3 stories about, empty nester syndrome, whatever. So it's just not right for them at that time. Always know that whatever you're putting out there, a lot of times when you're submitting, it's simply what is or is not needed at that time. It has nothing to do with the quality of your work. Here are just a handful of, and please feel free to take a picture of this if you're interested. Here's a handful of ones that I know do take currently. Now, I will just say, you see that green up there? Local newspapers are your best bet if you've never been published. A lot of local newspapers, including our Beacon here in the area, will take, they have a writer, Richard Morgan, who actually wrote a memoir about, and it's only a memoir from like age 4 up to 18, of living and growing up in the Port Clinton area. He writes for the Beacon. He does a really nice column, and his book is available at Millie Magoo's. Wonderful writer. And his stories are, again, just moments in time. But he started with his local newspapers, Many of these, FYI, I've never been published in any of these others that I'm listing here. Just so you know, I'm not that good. So at least I haven't tried to submit there, and maybe I will someday. But for those that are trying to make more money at this than just, bragging rights, try some of these. And again, always remember that it is your story. It's brave to put that information out there to the public, even to your family members. What I want to leave you with, before we take some questions, I'm going to read to you a couple of pages from Finding Sutton's Choice that are relevant to this situation. And I want you to think about what I just told you in terms of starting an essay. Now, this is a journal entry. The main character, Charlotte Sutton, finds a journal of her father's. She never really understood her relationship with her father. She didn't feel she had one. And what she didn't know is he just wasn't very good at showing it. And she had found a journal of his that told a lot of the stories of him as a parent and how that made him feel. But I want you to be thinking mostly as I'm reading this about the sensory, about the action verbs, about the things that I utilized in this story that go in line with what you've been taught about essays. By early Christmas morning, Franco Bellamer's predicted snowfall lay like a thick blanket on the waterfront lawn. Ice crystals weighed heavy on the trees, bending the limbs low to the ground. There was a quiet about the small community, as if everyone had hunkered down and would hibernate until spring. While Chuck took a proper rest in his room before everyone converged on the house for Christmas dinner, Charlotte sat on the couch with her father's journal open in her lap. On a branch just outside the living room window, a cardinal contrasted against the white backdrop. It was unusual to see so much snow this early in the winter, turning Sutton's Choice, that's the name of the cottage, by the way, into a cozy cocoon. Charlotte returned her attention to the journal in her hands. The few entries she'd read had provided a gift, a great gift, an insight she'd craved nearly all her life. She'd discovered in some small part how her father felt about being a dad, how he parented, how he loved. For her, the journal was the most meaningful thing her father had ever written. Much like Charlotte with her own journal, Chuck had poured everything he was feeling, all his dreams and insecurities as a parent and as a person, onto the pages in indelible ink. Here's the journal entry. Charlie, age 3. Charlie is the nickname of Charlotte, so that's what her father called her, Charlie. I traveled a lot this month. Came in on a red-eye last night from Boston so I could take my little girl to a Toledo Mudhens game today. Before Charlie, I barely looked back when I got on a plane. Now I feel pulled in 2 directions. I'm starting to realize I barely know my daughter. She's a mystery to me. One I'm not sure I'll ever have enough time to solve. Elise handles everything. I'd like to say I feel bad about that, but not really. Purple dresses with satin ribbons, dolls with half their clothes missing, stuffed teddy bears. I don't know how to interact with any of it. I always thought I'd have a boy. Boys aren't mysterious, but Charlie sure is. Today I got us seats right behind the dugout, down the first baseline. I bought cotton candy and thought we were having a grand old time. In the third, a fly ball came right at us. I caught it and handed it to Charlie. She looked at it, looked at me, looked at it again, then chucked the thing back out onto the field. She looked so proud of herself, her bright eyes and freckles framed by that dark hair beneath the baseball cap I'd bought her. Ball, Daddy, she pointed at the pitcher. Baseball? I shook my head, sorry to tell her it was no longer ours. Charlie looked at me with those big eyes, then back at the pitcher. Then she cried, not just a whimper, but howling gasps. We left early. I couldn't console her all the way home. When we got back to the house, I snagged an old ball from a box of memorabilia and handed it to Charlie. She stopped crying immediately and smiled up at me, offering the ball right back. Baseball, Daddy? Baseball? She seemed more pleased to give it to me than she'd seemed receiving it. Girls, I'll never understand them. Charlotte didn't remember the game, but she could read between the lines. Since she could remember, Chuck had loved baseball. He'd breathed it, ate it, slept it. Charlotte assumed, even at 3, she'd wanted to make him proud and play ball. She'd thrown the ball onto the field to show him she could do it, and then she'd offered him the second baseball as a gift from daughter to father. Where's the mystery in that? So Charlotte basically just gave us the point of that journal. Finding Sutton's Choice is chock full of memories. Again, I can't say enough about how important it is and how cathartic, really, it can be to get your memories down on paper. If you're never comfortable showing them to other people, that's fine, perfectly fine. But if it's something that you would like to do for family so that they have a record, I highly recommend just jump in, just start. Pick a topic and do as you did and take each day and answer a question that your family might want to know. Anybody have any questions for me about the process? Anything that you would like to ask me about the writing process in general? Or anything that I have done? Yeah.
The book that you talked about by the guy from Portland?
Yeah, Richard Morgan.
There was a Tales from the Hump.
That's Tales from the Hump.
That's that story. I thought he was a teacher. I thought he was a science teacher.
He is a teacher.
Oh, because you said he was a writer or something.
Well, he's a writer. He has a book. He is a writer. He writes essays for the Beacon. He is a retired teacher. No, the Beacon here in the area. We have the Beacon, which is, you can pick up free copies at Bassett's, any of the stores have the free copies of the local newspaper called the Beacon, which does do local news here. Richard's book, Tales from the Hump, so Richard is a retired teacher, and he grew up in the area, lived here for a lot of his life, moved away and moved back with his wife, and has put out both that book and another book about his job mowing lawns. That's his newest book out. But Richard and I have paired up a lot together for events, any of the local author events that go on. He and I usually end up at the same table together. For whatever reason, his book, which is completely real, about real stories, pairs extremely well with my book, which is fiction. I think because of the regional aspect of it. Anybody else have questions about anything, really? Yeah?
I just wondered, how long did it take you to write that?
Okay, so, so this is actually, so Finding Sutton's Choice is my debut fiction. So it took quite a while because I had never done fiction. I was, again, a reporter in Pittsburgh for a gazillion years. I was used to writing nonfiction. So when I moved here in 2018 permanently, not only did I have to give up my job at the newspaper in Pittsburgh, can't really cover news when I'm not there, but I also didn't really have any leads on job opportunities up here. I did actually do some writing for the Beacon for a while. And I'm currently writing for the magazine, it's a 55 and older magazine called Leisure Living. So I do articles for them. But I suddenly found myself in 2018, boy, I have a fly that just loves me today. I found myself in 2018, the fall of, so I got through my summer month, enjoyed myself thoroughly, first season fully here in Lakeside. I know a lot of people in Lakeside. I enjoyed my whole summer of knowing people, and then a lot of people went away. They went back to their homes. And that fall, I did what's called National Novel Writing Month. So National Novel Writing Month It was much more popular decades ago, but in 2018, I took the challenge of writing 50,000 words in a single month, which is about 1,700 words a day. Finding Sutton's Choice was my project. And they say, if you really want to make it through that first book, write what you know. I grew up in a fractured family dynamic. My father was gone since the age of 3. Many elements of my growing up years have been filtered into this story. I also wanted to bring awareness to Alzheimer's, something that I had been touched with through family members, and also had witnessed a very close friend be diagnosed as early onset in close proximity to when I moved here. All of that ended up being my first draft, which was only 50,000 words. That's shy about 30,000 words. So it took me quite a while to edit. I don't write linearly. I write by scenes. So I guess because I love writing essays, I would just, okay, I want to write a scene about this girl being bullied in high school. There's this scene, bullied in high school. I want to write a story about father wandering away with Alzheimer's and them not being able to find him. There's a scene. So I did all the scene work, and then I had to go back and figure out what was missing and figure out how that could go. I did not get it out and start submitting it until about 2000, well, it was right before COVID. And when I started in on the submission process, I ended up with over maybe 75 submissions prior to COVID. COVID came, I stopped everything, tucked it in a drawer. After COVID had settled down, I pulled it back out again, edited again, went to a conference for the Women's Fiction Writers Association, met a wonderful writer who happened to be at the same process, same point in her process. She had a book that was also being submitted. She's like, hey, what do you say? Let's exchange manuscripts. When I did that with her, we both improved. We were up in the 75, 80 range of how many submissions we'd done. We edited each other's manuscripts. Turns out we have very similar writing styles. It's the best thing we ever did for ourselves. So at that moment, we started submitting again. And once we both hit 100 agents, we decided to submit to small press that would still accept submissions without an agent. So not top 5, we're not talking Penguin Random House, but we're talking, there are many small press that still offer traditional. And this was a traditionally published book, so I didn't go the route of self-publishing for many reasons, but primarily I wanted the ability to get into every market. And by going traditionally, I was able to. Both of us ended up with multiple offers within months of us editing each other's work. It goes clearly back to how important editing is. You cannot write in a vacuum. If you think your work is perfect, it probably is not. Sorry. Don't mean to be a buzzkill on it. But it's so important to have other people look at your work. If you're going to actually start submitting, I suggest it. Hire an editor if you have to. Any other questions? Well, I am so grateful that you came and listened in on this. Yeah?
The guy that wrote the memoir, he said he lied. What did he lie about?
I have no idea. I never read his memoir. But Jim Frey did it was very popular at the time, Million Little Pieces, and I think he did a good bit of exaggerating, perhaps. And people called him out on it and did not go well for him. So I don't expect that I will ever do a true memoir. I will say one thing about writing fiction. It has allowed me a lot of grace to, change the narrative to a certain degree about my own upbringing. Sorry, microphone. My own upbringing in my life. So what I do like about fiction is if you are one of those people in this room that may not speak up, but has a story that they just don't feel they're quite ready to write, try writing it in fiction. Just make it up. Write in fiction. You can do whatever you want. You can name somebody a different name. You can put them in a completely different setting. You are going to benefit from that experience. Finding Sutton's Choice was one of the best things I've ever done for myself. I came to understand that my perceptions of my past did not make my past accurate. Yes?
My daughter has done NaNoWriMo for like 10 years or something. She started in college, and in fact, she wouldn't even come home for Thanksgiving
Yep.
because she was working on it.
Yep.
Do you recommend it highly?
Well, I'll tell you what it really did for me. So I'm a perfectionist. I think because I was writing, anytime I would have to submit an article to my editor, it would have to be almost perfect for my newspaper that I worked for. You know, we didn't have time for somebody to go in and correct things. So I have a bad habit of perfecting a single chapter for literally decades. The beauty of NaNoWriMo is it forces you, if you're going to make that commitment, and I did it very publicly, I did it on social media, and said, oh, I'm going to have 50,000 words by the end of November. And so by making it public, I was kind of forcing myself to follow through. It forced me to push on and not get hung up on the minutia of where the comma goes. So yes, I highly recommend NaNoWriMo. But I will say, I've done it 6 times successfully. I have 6 projects that are waiting, well, I have 5 projects that are waiting in the wings. One of them I'm currently working on, which is the follow-up to this, set 15 years in the future. But the thing about the NaNoWriMo project is I had the most success when I actually took the time to kind of organize what I was going to be writing about. I didn't just jump in with no idea. All right. I do have books up here. If anybody wants to buy, you're welcome to. I can work that out. Or please go up to Millie Magoo's. They have signed copies up there as well. And if you haven't been in the bookstore, since the big renovation, it's on Walnut, it is just lovely. It's adorable. All right. Thank you so much.